Hello everyone, this is going to be the first video of our course. So if you're interested in what I'm talking about, I'm going to be creating a course or the course is already released. This course is basically to take you from a complete beginner, from either someone who already has experience in Godot or programming or anything, into getting to the point where you can actually create your own game. And that is what we're going to be doing. So the first step or process is to create a platform game. So I'll be going through an example of how to set up a simple scene. We'll be going through some of the properties, and we'll also be going through some specific nodes that will be pretty important to the assignment that will be assigned later. All right, so the first step is to make sure we've imported our folder, and then we're going to create 3 folders to organize our game. Now, this is just what I've gotten used to. This isn't the default of every company, but this is something I do. So I'm going to create an assets folder, a scenes folder, and a script folder. This way I can keep everything organized, and it's very easy to just make sure I keep track of everything. So I'm going to make sure I take this asset folder and drop it in my assets. There we go. And I'm going to open up my reference project settings to make sure I get everything right. Now we haven't created anything yet, and that's okay. What we're going to do is we're going to go to the top left, click project settings, and this panel should open up. Now from here, we can rename the name of our game or the actual Godot project, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go to the left side. Under display, I'm going to click window. Alternatively, we can also type in window, and window should pop up on the left. So now here, I'm going to make sure I switch this to 162, and the height is going to be 288. And then I'm going to go to advanced settings. And in order to test this and see what the difference is, there is override, but we're not going to touch that just yet. Let's close this, and I'm going to play. Well, we actually need to create a scene to play. So what we'll do is we'll create a 2D scene, and we'll save this as our main. We'll just say main, and we'll put this in our scenes file. Let's save. Let's click play again. We'll select current, and here we go. Here's our window. Now this happened because we made our window a little smaller. Now what happens if we change our override? Well, what I want to do is I actually want to take this, and I'm going to double it. You can do that by saying times 2. We can take 162 and say times 2. And now let's actually go down a little bit more. Under mode, we're going to keep it, or we're going to select canvas items. And I'll explain what that is much later on. But for now, let's see what happens. Our window is now bigger. So the override, what it did is it basically made our window bigger, but it didn't make our pixels bigger. So if I were to have an icon in here, let's drag our icon in and see the window screen. It covers pretty much all of it. If I play, it doesn't matter how big my window is because this will always stretch. Now there's one other thing that we have noticed is that this guy is a little pixelated. Now let's go into our project settings one more time. We're going to search up filter, and it will be under texture. Here it is. And instead of linear, we're going to select nearest. And we're going to close. And now we can see it's no longer, well, it's pixelated, but it's properly pixelated. All right, so let's delete this icon by selecting the icon node on the top left over here. And I'm just going to hit delete, and it's going to say delete node. And I'm going to say OK. Awesome. From here, we're going to get started on the player and the ground. So let's add the ground first, because I think that's relatively simple. All we really need is something called a static body. So if I search up static body, we will find static body 2D, and we can hit create. Now, if you're confused about how to add nodes, you can hit the plus button, which is how I usually do it, or you can right-click the node that you want to add to and hit Add Child Node, or Control A, supposedly. And now we're going to add a collision. because we need a collision shape for this guy. Now we're going to take the shape and we're going to select a rectangle. Now we have a few options on the top of what to do. Now the first default one is the select mode. This allows us to kind of move things around, right? We can move things, we can stretch things. It's kind of cool. I'm just going to Control Z. But what I want to do is I want to take my static body, the actual body, and move it. So I'm going to do that using move mode. I'm going to take this down here. I'm going to go back, select the select mode. I guess Control Alt drag. I'm not sure how you would do that, but that's okay. We're just going to take our collision box now and drag this as if we had a floor. Now we're going to save. And one other thing that I want to make aware, or you aware of, is grid snap. I use this quite consistently. I will turn it on and off depending on what I want to do, because now we can see if I want this to snap into our screen, it's quite easy. However, you can see that it's kind of a pixel or two away, so we're going to turn it off and put it in. And there we go. We can now see it's pretty much pixel perfect. All right, there's our floor, but if I play, I can't see anything. Now, there's one option in the editor, in the debug, there's an option called visible collision shapes. Now, if I select this and then play, I'll be able to see my collision shape, but that's not really what I want, because when I'm actually playing my game, that's not really what I want. I'm going to turn this off, but do keep aware that that is there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a panel, and I'm going to use this as my floor. So I'm going to take my panel and stretch it. So now when I play, I'm able to see some sort of floor. I'm going to stretch it a little bit more so it doesn't look very weird and is sharp on the edges. All right, let's minimize that by clicking this guy over here. Now I'm going to add my player by adding a node, and we're going to search up character body, if I can type that correctly. Character body 2D. There we go. Now we want a few things here. We want a collision shape, and we don't actually have to search anything up because in the recent, we see we have a collision shape. So let's hit that and create, and we'll give it a collision shape of, maybe I'll say a circle. Actually, yeah, we'll give it a capsule. I think our players are usually capsules. All right, so let's zoom in a little bit, and let's actually take our player and move him into the middle of the screen. There we go. And in here, we want to add our image of our player, right? So let's go into our assets folder and find our player. Here we go. We can go into here, character, PNG. We can select this one. Now we see that we have a bunch of different things. I'm only going to use this guy. So I'm going to take my body and pop him in to this. Now here we can see that our body is not actually a part of our character body. So we want to actually take this node and drag it into our character body 2D. Now here we can go to our character body 2D, or our node that is now body, and we're going to go to the transform. Now we can see the position is 3 and -3. This means it is not centered from the character body. So whenever the character body moves, this node is always going to be off center. So we're going to reset it at 0, 0 by clicking that little loop thing. Awesome. Let's save and let's play and see what we have. Okay, cool. We have nothing. Well, what do we do now? Well, we want to add a script. So in our character body 2D, let's actually rename this to player. And we're going to hit add script. Now here we have character body basic movement, I actually do suggest that you take a look at it and try it, but we're going to do it from scratch. So we're going to select default, create, and now we have ready and process. Now in our process function, we basically want two things. We want one sort of code that will allow us to add gravity. So let's comment that. So let's say add gravity to the player. And then we want another function or some sort of code that will allow us to move. So move player left and right. Now in the add gravity to the player, what we want to do is there's something called velocity And our velocity consists of an x and y axis. Now, the way this works, let me pull out Paint. The way this works is we essentially have an x and y axis, right? This is the y-axis, and this is the x-axis. Now, don't worry, we're not doing any complex math. This isn't calculus. This is very simple. On an x and y-axis, we generally have 1, 2, 3, etc. Correct? And this is usually the positive, so this is 1, 2, 3, etc. However, there are two things to note. In Godot, the y-axis is reversed. So this is all negative. In fact, we can go to our 2D space and we can see on the left side, if I zoom out, you can see over here, it says negative 200 on the left, correct? And the y or the x-axis is normal, right? The right side is positive and the left side is negative. Now going back to our paint, what we want to do is we have our player here, right? So there's our little stickman player. We want to make sure that our player goes downwards by adding gravity. Now, how can we do that? Well, through code, we usually can access the gravity or velocity by actually just typing velocity. And it even helps us by completing it. Now, velocity consists of something called a vector2. This is called vector2 because we are in a 2D space. Now, if I was making a 3D game, I would be using vector3, right? So up here, outside, I'm just going to type in vector2. We can see that it's called vector2. Now, this consists of an x and y coordinate. Now, if I want to access the y coordinate, I can either access it through vector2, or I can just say velocity.y. Because I know that this velocity is a vector2, I can say we're going to access the .y. So we're going to delete this. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. You're going to try to guess. When I want to add gravity, thinking back to my graph, do I want to add velocity or subtract velocity? Hopefully you've answered the question and guessed that we actually want to add velocity because the top side is negative. So we want to go this way, right? Because if we were to subtract, we would be going upwards. So what we're going to do is we're going to say plus equals, let's say 200 times delta. Now, what is delta? Delta is this guy. The delta is called every frame. It says right here, called every frame. Delta is the elapsed time since the previous frame. Now, basically, it's a very fast function that is called very consistently throughout our game. Now, we're going to actually do this because, actually, let's test this and see what we get. So let's play. And nothing happens. Oh my gosh, why is nothing happening? Maybe we actually have to have physics process. Let me double check this. No, we don't. All right. I believe we need to actually add this next piece of code. Otherwise, it's not going to work at all. So we actually need to check if we're not on the floor. So we're going to use this function called isOnFloor, and we're going to say not. Now we can either type not, or we can say this exclamation mark. This exclamation mark is basically the equivalent of saying not. So let's play and see if this works. Okay, it is not working. So strange. All right, I'm going to try to figure out what is going on. I actually think I'm going to try this one last thing. And if this doesn't work, then I'm not sure and I'll have to pause. Okay. Okay, never mind. I just remembered why. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, so in a body, we need something called move and slide. That is why our player was not moving. So move and slide, we can actually hit Control and left click, and this will give us a description of the function. But basically what it does is it actually allows us to use velocity. Now, okay, this was a rookie mistake on my part. If I actually removed all this and I used position instead, and said gravity times delta, this should work. Except I have to say .y. Yeah, that should work because the position can always be used and adjusted. Now, velocity cannot always be used, or it can only be used if we're using move and slide. Okay, that is why it wasn't working before. So here we go. We now added gravity to our player, and we can now move and slide, and our player will hit the ground. There we go. Now you can see that it hit the ground kind of in the middle. That's because our collision shape has not been changed. Now I want you to try and change it accordingly. So I'm going to actually reset this to a rectangle, and I'm going to adjust this like so. Awesome. So I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to go back to my script, and let's complete this move player left and right. Now this is actually pretty easy, because what we can do is we can just get the direction by using something called get axis. Now, first of all, we want to basically set the direction by saying variable direction is equal to the input of dot get axis. Now, this get axis is basically going to be using this idea of the x-axis of whatever I give, actually, right? So the left and y are my essentially left, the right x and the left x, right? So when I click on the right on my keyboard, right? So if I click right, this will actually return me vector 2, 0, 1. In fact, to test this, what we can do is we can say print direction. And if I play, it'll print me 0. Right now it'll print me 0 because I'm not moving. Now if I click right, it's giving me 1. Now if I click left, we can see that now it's -1. So now what we want to do is we want to use that to see if, okay, well, now what do I do, right? Now I want to move. Well, the first thing I can do is I can say if direction is just valid, then we'll actually do something with it. Well, what can we do? We want to move our velocity, right? So maybe let's copy this and change this to x. But we don't really want gravity, right, for this. We want a different sort of variable for this guy. We want something called speed. So we're going to create a constant up here called speed and give it a value of 100. Now, the reason we're making it constant is so that we make sure that this never changes. A constant is something that can never change, whereas a variable can change. Okay, so let's go over here and give it an else function. And this is basically going to allow us to check if the direction is valid. Then we'll do this. If not, then what are we going to do? Well, we want to move to 0, right? So we can actually just do that by saying, here we go, velocity x is equal to 0. Now, one thing to note is, first of all, this is going to add, right? We don't really want to add to our velocity. We want to set it equal to the speed times our direction. So let's actually say direction times our speed times delta. Now, actually, let's remove the delta there. We don't want the delta. We just want speed times direction. And let's play. And now we can see when I move, we go right and left, and it works pretty nicely. Now, what about jumping? Well, this jumping is actually pretty simple. I want you to try to figure it out first, but if not, that's okay. You can keep watching the video and we'll figure it out together. Okay, so let's add a comment over here saying check for jump. Here, we can add a check of input. Now, how do we do that? Well, we can do that by saying if input.isAction just pressed, UI accept. Now, UI accept by default is the spacebar or enter, I think. It's either spacebar or enter or both. So I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that's the default. Now, here, if I press spacebar, what I can do is I want to jump, right? Now, how do I jump? Hopefully you probably guessed, I want to change my Y velocity. Now, I can do that by either adding, subtracting, I don't know, what do I want to do? Well, you'd think maybe we want to subtract. But in reality, what we can do is we can actually just set it to 200 or some big number. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it to -400. Now, why negative? Well, if we go back to our paint, remember, let's say we're on the floor over here, right? And I want to jump. Well, I wouldn't set it at 400 because 400 will be down here. So I want to set it to negative 400 because negative 400 would be somewhere up there, right? Now back to here. There's one more thing we want to do, but I want to try to let you guess what that is because there's something missing from our if statement. Let's try playing and see what we have. Whoa, I have a jump. But what happens if I just... Whoa, I could keep jumping. Well, that's kind of cool. I can infinitely jump, and maybe that's what you want, but maybe it's not what you want. So what we can do is we can add an and statement here and say and is on floor. So now when I play, I can only jump if I'm on the floor. So I'm trying to spam it, but it's not working. So there we go. We now have some nice movement, and I can even move in the air. And we have some nice platform movement. Now, I want you to try to experiment with this. I have a question, I guess, I suppose, after this video that you can try. Let's say I don't want to move while I'm in the air. How can I change that? I want you to try to edit your code so that your player does not move while you're in the air. Awesome. That's the end of this tutorial. If you guys enjoyed this tutorial and found that you learned a lot, I would love if you guys checked out my courses. I have a few courses on Udemy. I have a big course coming up soon, and that's what this video is about. And it's not even about it, it's supporting that course. The basic concept of the course is to basically take you through a bunch of exercises, and it goes through a 3-step process from understanding the concept of what we're learning, and then it goes through the example, and that is what this is. This is the example of that course. So you have 1/3 access to this course basically, and the third part is the exercise. Now, I asked you a question in the end of this video, and that is basically what the exercise is. So it's going to take you through a bunch of questions and things that will help you learn by asking you questions while going through things. So if you guys enjoyed this course and my questions and the way I kind of explain things and whatever, I would love if you guys checked out my courses. If not, that's okay. You can keep, just hit that subscribe button down there, and that can also help me so much. And thank you so much. I will see you guys next time.